It was Christmas Eve in New York City, and little Ava Johnson was standing by the cracked window of their cramped apartment in Brooklyn, gazing out at the snowfall. Snowflakes drifted like soft whispers, blanketing the world in a frosty glow. The air was filled with the faint melodies of carolers from a distant street, but inside their modest apartment, it felt like the warmth of the season had abandoned them. There were no twinkling lights, no decorations, no tree. Only the sound of Ava's mother, Rebecca, struggling to breathe from her sickbed in the corner of the room. "Mommy," Ava whispered, tiptoeing to her mother's side. "Are you awake?" Rebecca's eyes fluttered open, glazed over with fever. Her face was pale, drawn, and her lips cracked with thirst. "Ava, sweet girl," she rasped. "What time is it?" Ava glanced at the old clock on the wall, the only decoration in their bare apartment. "It's almost 7, Mommy. You've been asleep all day again." Rebecca tried to sit up, but collapsed back against the pillow, too weak to move. "I'm sorry, Ava," she whispered, tears falling from her eyes. "I should be taking care of you. I should." A coughing fit overtook her, harsh and painful. Ava rushed to the kitchen, her hands trembling as she filled a chipped mug with water and brought it back to her mother. But Rebecca's hands could barely hold it steady enough to drink. Once the coughing subsided, Rebecca met her daughter's eyes. "Ava, honey, listen to me. In my purse, there's $12. It's all we have until my next paycheck. Can you go ask Mrs. Lawrence next door to watch over you for a little while? Just until I can figure things out." Ava's heart sank, fear gripping her. "Why? Where are you going, Mommy?" Rebecca's voice grew barely audible as she laid back, exhaustion heavy in her eyes. "I need to go to the hospital, sweetie. I'm very sick, but I don't have insurance. The free clinic. They said they can't help me anymore unless I pay for the treatment." Ava shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "No, you can't leave me. What if you don't come back?" Rebecca gathered every ounce of strength and pulled Ava into her arms, holding her close. "I'll come back, I promise. But Ava, I need medicine. Real medicine. The kind that costs more than we have. Please, help me." The desperation in Rebecca's voice shook Ava to her core. She clung tightly to her mother, afraid of the words she couldn't say. They stayed like that for a long while, mother and daughter holding on in the dim room, while the Christmas festivities outside seemed like another world. When Rebecca fell back into a restless sleep, Ava sat on the cold floor, staring at her mother's purse. $12. The antibiotics Rebecca needed were $250, a sum so far out of reach it might as well have been $1,000,000. Ava looked around their tiny apartment, hoping to find something, anything of value that could help. Their furniture was worn and mismatched, and their dishes had long since lost their set. There was nothing of worth, except for her most cherished possession, the porcelain doll on the shelf by her bed. It was a gift from her mother, given to her last year for her 6th birthday when life seemed easier. Ava had loved the doll, its soft brown curls, delicate pink dress, and the way its glass eyes seemed to watch over her at night. Rebecca had worked for months to save up the money for it. "Her name is Lily, and she'll always look after you," Rebecca had said. Ava loved Lily more than anything in the world, but she loved her mother more. And now, her mother needed her. The choice was clear. Ava carefully took Lily from the shelf, wrapped her in a soft blanket, and put on her thin coat, one that barely kept the December chill out. She tiptoed past her mother's bed, quietly slipped out of the apartment, and locked the door behind her, tucking the key into her pocket. The hallway smelled of old food and cigarette smoke, and Ava's small boots echoed as she descended the 3 flights of stairs. Her heart raced with fear, but she couldn't let it stop her. She had a mission: sell Lily, get the money, save her mother. Outside, the wind whipped against her face, the snow biting through her coat. But she clutched Lily tighter, blocking out the cold as she walked down the street. She had a plan, though it was vague. There was a wealthier part of town about 15 blocks away. The homes there were grand, decorated with lights and wreaths, and people there could afford to buy a special doll. By the time Ava reached the neighborhood, her fingers were numb, and her nose ran with the cold. The streets here were lit by soft Christmas lights, and the storefronts were warm and inviting. Families gathered in warm homes, their windows glowing with festive cheer. Ava felt a pang of envy, but shook it off. She had to focus. Her eyes scanned the streets, searching for someone who might be kind enough to buy Lily. And then, through the window of an upscale café, she saw him. A man sat alone at a corner table, staring into his coffee. He looked lost, his face full of sadness. He was dressed in an expensive suit, and from the way he carried himself, Ava could tell he was the kind of person who could afford anything. But there was something in his eyes, loneliness, pain, that made her think he might understand her. Taking a deep breath, Ava pushed open the door to the cafe, the warmth enveloping her immediately. The man behind the counter noticed her first. "Little girl, are you lost? Where are your parents?" Ava ignored him and walked directly toward the man. She felt a nervous flutter in her chest, but she couldn't turn back now. "Excuse me, sir," she said, holding up Lily. "Would you like to buy my doll? She's very special. She has real porcelain, real hair, and her dress was handmade." The man looked up slowly. His eyes were dark and intense, studying her. For a long moment, he didn't say anything, and Ava began to worry that she had made a mistake. Finally, he spoke, his voice deep and calm. "Why are you selling your doll, little girl?" Ava's words tumbled out in a rush. "My mommy is really sick. She has pneumonia, and the medicine she needs costs $250, but we only have $12. I am selling Lily so I can get the money for her medicine. Will you buy her, please?" The man's expression softened, his shock turning to concern. He leaned forward, his voice gentle. "What's your name, little one?" Ava hesitated. Mommy had always warned her not to tell strangers her name, but this man seemed different. There was something about him that made her want to trust him. "Ava," she whispered. "Ava Johnson. What's your name?" The man paused, his expression unreadable, and then replied, "My name is Thomas, Thomas Williams." For a moment, Ava just stared at him, her heart racing. "So, will you buy Lily?" she asked, holding the doll out to him. Thomas studied her for a long moment before finally nodding. "Tell me where your mother is, Ava. I'll help." Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Like, share, and comment where you are watching from. After James stepped away, Mia sat quietly next to Sarah's hospital bed, her small hands fidgeting with the hem of her jacket. The words she had overheard lingered in her mind, filling her with both confusion and a strange sense of comfort. The man she had met just days ago was her father, her real father, and now they were going to be a family. But what did that even mean? Was it possible? Could someone like him, someone so powerful, really want to be a part of her life? "Mommy, how did we get here?" Mia asked, her voice soft and filled with wonder. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she turned to look at her daughter. The last few days had been nothing short of a miracle. From the moment James had walked into their lives, everything had changed. Mia had found her father, and Sarah had found herself at the center of a world she didn't know how to navigate. Mia's voice pulled her back to the present, and with a quiet sigh, Sarah began to recount the events. "Well, sweetie, it all started when you went to sell Lily, your doll," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly as she spoke. "You did what you had to do to help me, and you found James at that cafe. And after that, everything changed." As Mia listened, her eyes widened with disbelief. "I found my daddy," she whispered, as if she were trying to wrap her mind around the idea. Sarah's heart ached at the thought of how much her little girl had suffered, how much she had struggled without a father to support them. "Yes, honey," Sarah said softly, brushing a stray lock of hair from Mia's face. "You did. You found your daddy." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as she looked at James, who stood in the doorway, his tall frame a steady presence. He hadn't left their side since the moment he arrived. He had promised to help them, and he had kept that promise. James stepped into the room, his eyes softening as he gazed at Sarah. "Sarah," he said gently, his voice steady. "Can Mia wait outside for a moment? We need to talk." Mia, sensing the gravity of the conversation, nodded and left the room reluctantly, her eyes darting between her mother and James. "Are you guys going to talk about grown-up stuff?" she asked. James smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. Boring grown-up stuff. We'll fill you in later," he said, his voice warm but distant. Once Mia was out of the room, James sat down next to Sarah's bed, the weight of the conversation settling heavily between them. "Sarah," James said, his voice low, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer truthfully. Is Mia my daughter?" Sarah's face paled, and her breath caught in her throat. She had known this question was coming, but hearing it out loud felt like a punch to the gut. She had tried to find him, tried to reach out, but nothing had worked. She had raised Mia on her own, kept her safe, and loved her with everything she had. But now, the truth was here. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she nodded. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Mia is your daughter. I tried to tell you. I tried so hard to find you after that night. But I couldn't. James's heart sank. He had only just learned about Mia, but Sarah had been carrying this burden for 6 long years. He could hear the pain in her voice, the regret, and the years of struggle she had endured. How did you try to find me? James asked quietly, his voice thick with emotion. I called your office. Dozens of times, Sarah said, her voice breaking. I hired a private investigator. I did everything I could, but I couldn't reach you. I couldn't get past your assistant. And then, I gave up. James clenched his fists, rage building inside him. Victoria. The name rang through his mind like a bell. Victoria Ashford. He spat, his voice full of disgust. She blocked your calls. Sarah nodded, her expression pained. She told me to stop calling. She threatened to have me arrested for harassment. She told me you'd deny everything and that I was wasting my time. James felt the fury rise within him. The woman who had kept him from his own daughter. The woman who had manipulated him and caused so much pain. I had 2 children, he whispered, the weight of the realization crushing him. And one of them is gone because I didn't know to help you. I failed you both. Sarah reached out and grasped his hand, her voice gentle. James, this isn't your fault. You didn't know. I don't blame you. I blame the circumstances. I blame the system that failed us. But I should have tried harder, James said, his voice raw with anguish. I should have known. I could have helped. I didn't know how to get you to hear me, Sarah said, her voice filled with quiet determination. But I raised Mia alone. I kept her safe. I gave her everything I could. James squeezed her hand tightly, his eyes brimming with tears. I'm going to support both of you, he said firmly. I should have been there from the beginning. But now I'm here. I'll be the father Mia needs, and I'll make sure you have everything you need, too. Sarah looked at him, her eyes full of doubt. I don't want to take advantage of you, James. I don't want you to think I'm just after your money. James smiled, though there was no humor in it. Sarah, you've been living in poverty for years. You've worked hard. You've kept Mia safe. You're not a gold digger. I'm not helping you out of guilt. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. I'm going to be Mia's father. I'm going to be part of both of your lives. Sarah looked at him, her heart beating wildly. Could it really be this simple? Could she really trust him? After all these years of being alone, of fighting for everything on her own. I want to be involved, Sarah, James said gently. I want to get to know you again. And I want to be the father Mia deserves. I'm not going anywhere. The days leading up to the family gathering at Elenina's estate had been a whirlwind. Sarah felt like she was living someone else's life, as though she were in the middle of a dream that she had no right to be a part of. Just 3 days ago, she had been lying in a cold, dilapidated apartment, her life hanging by a thread. Now, she was getting ready to attend a New Year's Eve gathering at one of the most prestigious estates in Connecticut, with James and Mia by her side. As Sarah adjusted the dress that Adriana, Elenina's stylist, had chosen for her, she couldn't help but feel like an imposter. The midnight blue cocktail dress was elegant, simple but luxurious, everything she was not. Her gaze lingered in the mirror. The woman staring back at her seemed unfamiliar, polished and polished. Gone was the tired mother who worked multiple jobs, juggling everything in a rundown apartment in Brooklyn. Instead, standing before her was a version of herself that belonged in this world of wealth and high society. She was startled out of her thoughts by James entering the room, wearing a sharp suit, looking every bit the successful businessman that he was. He smiled softly at her reflection. You look beautiful, he said, his voice warm with admiration. Sarah's heart skipped. I feel like I'm playing dress up, she confessed. Like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not. James came up behind her and placed a hand on her shoulder. You're not pretending. You're exactly who you are. A strong, intelligent woman who has done the impossible, raising a daughter alone, surviving. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. Sarah's chest tightened as she looked at him in the mirror. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that she had a place in his world. But deep down, fear gripped her. Fear that this sudden shift in her life, was too good to be true. Are you ready? James asked, his voice low but steady. Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. I don't know if I can do this. I'm so scared of what's going to happen tonight. James gave her a soft smile. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. You're not alone anymore. Not with me, and not with Mia. As they headed downstairs, Sarah felt a strange mix of dread and hope. Mia was already bouncing with excitement, her eyes wide and eager to see the big, beautiful house where they would be staying. Sarah, for all her worries, couldn't help but smile at how carefree Mia was. The little girl was just happy to have her own room with a view of the park, something Sarah had never been able to provide before. The drive to Connecticut was silent, save for Mia's occasional excited chatter in the back seat. Sarah's thoughts spiraled. She wasn't used to this world where everything seemed so polished, so perfect. She didn't belong. She was the poor girl who had lived in a rundown apartment, worked herself to exhaustion, and struggled to keep a roof over her daughter's head. She had nothing in common with the women James was likely to introduce her to tonight. As they pulled up to the Harrington estate, the grandeur of the place overwhelmed her. The sprawling mansion looked like something out of a fairy tale. The white marble columns, the sprawling manicured lawns, the luxury that dripped from every corner. It felt too much. She felt out of place, small, like a speck of dirt in a world of diamonds. "Wow," Mia whispered from the back seat. "It looks like a castle." Sarah couldn't agree more. It felt like one, a gilded cage, a place where she might never belong. They entered the grand foyer, and Sarah immediately felt the eyes on her. People in designer gowns and tuxedos sipped cocktails and made polite conversation. And then, standing at the top of the staircase, was Evelina Harrington. She was even more imposing in person, wearing an elegant silver gown that glimmered as she moved. "Welcome, Sarah, Mia," Evelina announced as she descended, her voice as strong and commanding as her presence. James's hand found Sarah's as they stood together, and for a brief moment, Sarah felt a flicker of reassurance. But it quickly vanished as the whispers started. Every step they took into the room felt like walking deeper into the lion's den. The moment Evelina introduced them, Sarah's anxiety shot through the roof. There was a chilling silence, followed by a sharp voice cutting through the air. "James has a child?" Aunt Patricia asked, her tone icy and judgmental. "And she's just showing up now, claiming to be part of this family?" James, ever protective, stepped forward, his jaw clenched. "Aunt Patricia, enough. Mia is my daughter, and that's all there is to say." But Patricia wasn't done. "And her mother? What's her story? Did you meet her in a bar and get pregnant by mistake?" Before Sarah could defend herself, a younger woman stepped in. "Aunt Patricia, that's unnecessary," Rebecca said, her tone kind but firm. "Let's be welcoming." Rebecca turned to Sarah with a warm smile. "I'm Rebecca, by the way, Thomas's daughter. It's nice to meet you." The kindness in Rebecca's eyes was like a balm for Sarah's raw nerves. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, feeling a lump form in her throat. As the evening unfolded, Sarah realized she had underestimated the strength of the Harrington family. Yes, there were whispers. Yes, there was judgment. But there were also moments of kindness. Thomas, James's uncle, led Mia to the library, where she was introduced to his grandchildren. They made Sarah's heart swell as she watched her daughter, who had so little, finally enjoy something every child deserved: a childhood full of innocence, laughter, and joy. But just when Sarah thought she could relax, the storm hit. Victoria Ashford, James's ex-girlfriend and former assistant, had somehow managed to crash the party. "You've brought a criminal into the family home," Victoria sneered, her voice dripping with venom. "Is this what you're bringing to the table, James? A girl with a criminal past?" The words were a slap to Sarah's face. But James stood by her, unwavering. "Victoria, leave. This is not your place anymore." Victoria didn't back down. She dropped bombshells about Sarah's past, including a CPS investigation, and then, just when Sarah thought things couldn't get worse, she mentioned a warrant for her arrest, something that had happened years ago due to unpaid traffic tickets. The room went cold. Sarah felt her world shattering. Everything Victoria had said was true, everything Sarah had tried to bury. But before she could process it all, Victoria's cruel words hit too hard. "What kind of mother do you think she is, James? A prostitute's daughter, a nobody." The tears came then, unbidden and overwhelming. Sarah stumbled out into the cold December night, away from the whispers, away from the judgment, away from everything that was suffocating her. "Sarah," James's voice was gentle but firm as he appeared at her side. "Look at me." But Sarah couldn't. She couldn't face him now that he knew everything. "Take Mia and leave me," she choked out. "She deserves better than this." James's hand was warm on her back, his voice firm, yet full of compassion. You're not leaving, Sarah. Not after everything we've been through. We're facing this together, every part of it, every challenge, and every triumph. The press conference had barely concluded when Sarah stepped out from the back entrance, her nerves still buzzing. The room was spinning with the flashes of cameras, the barrage of invasive questions, and the weight of the world pressing on her shoulders. But as she walked into the quiet calm of James's arms, it all began to feel a little more bearable. James's voice was steady, his presence grounding her in ways she hadn't thought possible. "You were perfect," he whispered into her ear, the warmth of his breath calming her still jittery nerves. "The truth is on our side now." Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The press had been relentless, but the truth had finally been said. The lies, the manipulation by Victoria, all of it was exposed. The world now knew about her past, her struggles, and her resilience. It wasn't how she'd ever imagined her story being told, but it was the truth, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like she had nothing to hide. But despite the media's backlash and the judgment that still lingered, something in her began to shift. The past was no longer a haunting presence that controlled her every move. With James at her side and Mia's laughter echoing through the house, Sarah could almost allow herself to breathe, to hope. The days that followed were a blur of legal meetings, more media scrutiny, and trying to shield Mia from the world that seemed so determined to label them. But amidst all the chaos, Sarah found moments of peace. She spent time with Mia, watched her play, and even found herself smiling at the simple joys of life, something she hadn't allowed herself to do in years. As January unfolded, Sarah continued to adjust to the reality of her new life. She was enrolled at Columbia, thanks to Elenina's insistence, and the financial security James had provided made it seem like her world had transformed overnight. It felt surreal, but there was also a part of her that couldn't quite shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, she didn't deserve any of this. One afternoon, over lunch with Elenina, Sarah confessed what had been eating at her. "I used to have a purpose," she said softly, stirring her coffee. "Every day was a battle to survive, to keep me safe. Now, I don't know what to do with myself. I'm not sure who I am without that struggle." Elenina watched her thoughtfully, her sharp gaze unwavering. "It's common, you know," she said, her voice firm but compassionate. "When your circumstances change so dramatically, your identity can become a burden. You've been so focused on surviving, Sarah, that now, with the struggle behind you, you're lost. But that's not a bad thing. It's an opportunity. You have time now to figure out what you truly want." Sarah shook her head. "I feel guilty," she admitted. "Mia's safe, she's happy, and I have everything I ever dreamed of. A beautiful home, a real family. But I feel empty, like I'm not worthy of any of this." Elenina reached across the table, her hands gentle but strong. "You're grieving, Sarah. You're grieving the loss of the life you knew, the life you fought so hard to create. But don't let that grief rob you of what you have now. You've earned this, all of it. And in time, you'll find your new purpose." That evening, Sarah found herself in James's office, staring out of the window at the city lights. James was working late, but the silence between them felt comfortable now, like they didn't have to fill every moment with words. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah's voice broke the quiet, tentative but clear. James glanced up from his laptop. "Always," he said, his voice warm. Sarah hesitated, the weight of her question pressing on her chest. "Do you ever regret this? Finding us, I mean. Your life was simpler before. No scandals, no complicated past. Do you ever wish you had just walked away that night?" James closed his laptop and came around to kneel in front of her. His eyes locked onto hers, steady and filled with a depth that caught her breath. "Not for 1 second," he said, his voice unwavering. "Yes, the past few weeks have been crazy, but Mia is my daughter. And you." He took her hands in his. "You're the woman I've loved since that night. This isn't about obligation, Sarah. I want you. Both of you. I don't regret a thing." Tears pricked at Sarah's eyes as she looked at him, feeling the sincerity in every word. "I love you," she whispered, the confession tumbling out like a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "I've loved you since that first night. I never stopped." James's face broke into a radiant smile. "I love you too. I've known since the moment you smiled at me across that gallery." Sarah laughed through her tears, feeling the weight of all the months of doubt, the fear, the struggle finally begin to lift. Maybe it was possible, after all, to have the life she'd always dreamed of, to be loved, to be seen, and to have a family that would fight for her just as much as she would fight for them. Later that evening, after Mia had gone to bed, the three of them sat together, holding hands, united as a family. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt like maybe, just maybe, she could stop fighting. She didn't have to do everything alone anymore. And that was the greatest gift of all. Days passed, and the world began to shift for Sarah in ways she hadn't expected. The storm of the media frenzy had finally begun to calm, but the ripple effects were still being felt in her life. She and James were adjusting to their new reality, one that was filled with more love, more support, and more uncertainty than Sarah had ever known. At first, she felt like an imposter in this new world. There were moments when she'd glance around the penthouse and wonder how she had gotten here. One day, as she walked through the park with Mia, holding hands and watching the snowflakes drift down from the sky, Sarah couldn't help but think about how far they had come, how far she had come. It hadn't been an easy journey, but it had been worth it. Every hard day, every painful memory had led her to this moment. She had James by her side, and more importantly, she had Mia, her bright, strong daughter who was now starting to find her place in this world as well. Mia was already thriving in her new school, surrounded by friends and love, and Sarah felt that the world was finally beginning to make sense. But even with all the progress, there were still questions left unanswered, fears still lurking beneath the surface. Sarah knew she had made a promise to herself, to keep going, to embrace her new life. But it wasn't always that simple. One afternoon, after a particularly difficult conversation with her old neighbor in Brooklyn who had sent a message about a documentary series about her past, Sarah found herself on the balcony of the penthouse, staring out at the skyline of Manhattan. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, but she didn't check it. The weight of everything felt heavy today. Her past, her fears, the judgment she could still feel in the air sometimes. Suddenly, the door behind her opened, and James stepped out, his usual warm smile softened by the look of concern in his eyes. He walked up to her and leaned against the railing beside her. "Sarah," he said gently, "you okay?" She sighed, her breath a cloud in the cold air. "I'm trying to be," she admitted, her voice low. "I know I'm not supposed to still feel lost, but sometimes I do. I don't know how to be in this world. I don't know how to be who I am now, not who I used to be." James didn't say anything at first, just stood there with her, letting the silence settle between them. After a few moments, he reached for her hand, his touch grounding her. "You don't have to have it all figured out, Sarah. And you don't have to be anyone other than yourself." "I know," she said, squeezing his hand. "But what if who I am isn't enough? What if it's too much for you, for Mia?" "Listen to me," James said, turning her gently to face him. "You are more than enough. You've been enough since the day I first saw you, since the first time you smiled at me. You are the mother of my daughter. You've raised her with everything you had. You've been strong enough for both of you for so long. I know the world isn't kind, but you've got us now. You've got a family who will protect you, who will fight with you." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes, but she blinked them back, not wanting to break down in front of him again. She'd spent so much of her life holding everything together, so much of her life pretending to be okay when she wasn't. "You don't have to be perfect," James continued, his voice steady and reassuring. "You just have to be here, with us. You're not alone anymore." Sarah let out a shaky breath, feeling the weight in her chest lift just a little. For the first time in a long while, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could believe him. Later that night, as they sat together on the couch, Mia tucked in bed after a long day of playing with her cousins, Sarah found herself thinking about the future. The life she and James were building, the family they were becoming, was everything she dreamed of and more. But there was still the matter of her own future, the things she needed to do for herself. She thought about the foundation, about the work she wanted to do for other women who had been through what she had, who were still fighting every day just to survive. She leaned back, resting her head on James's shoulder. "I don't know what the future holds, but I think I'm starting to understand who I am in it," she said softly. James kissed the top of her head. "You're strong, Sarah. You always have been." She smiled, grateful for the love and support she'd found, and for the new beginning she had with her family. This life wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and that, in itself, was enough. The next few weeks brought both challenges and triumphs. Sarah had started working with the foundation, pouring her heart into helping other single mothers who were struggling the way she once had. It was hard, rewarding work, and she felt like she had finally found her place in this new world. As for her relationship with James, it deepened. They found time for quiet moments together, for long talks, and shared laughter, and in those moments, Sarah knew she was no longer just surviving. She was living. But it was the small moments, the ones where Mia would look up at them with a smile so bright it could light up a room, that reminded Sarah of why she'd fought so hard. To give her daughter a better life. To give herself the chance to heal. One evening, after a busy day, Sarah stood at the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Her phone buzzed again, another message from an old friend who had seen the articles in the press. She hesitated before opening it, knowing it might bring back unwanted memories of the past. But then, as she glanced over at James, who was busy reading a book with Mia curled up beside him, something inside her shifted. She didn't need to hide from the past anymore. It had shaped her, yes, but it didn't define her. She was building something new now, something worth fighting for. And with that thought, Sarah closed her eyes, letting the weight of the past fall away as she embraced the life in front of her. Her life, her family, her future. As we wrap up this incredible journey, it's important to reflect on the lessons we've learned along the way. Sarah's story reminds us that no matter where we come from, it's never too late to rewrite our own narrative. Life can be difficult, and we all face struggles, but those struggles don't define us. What matters is how we rise from them. Sarah found herself in a place she never imagined, surrounded by love, support, and a future she had only dreamed of, all because she refused to give up on herself, her daughter, and the life they deserved. This story is about more than just overcoming hardship. It's about belonging, finding a place where you are truly seen, loved, and valued for who you are. It's about understanding that family isn't just about blood, it's about love and loyalty. Sarah was given a family not because of what she had or didn't have, but because of who she was, strong, resilient, and determined to create a better future for her daughter. That's the kind of family we all deserve, one that sees us, supports us, and helps us become the best version of ourselves. The main takeaway here is that your past does not define your future. It doesn't matter where you started. What matters is where you are now and where you are going. Sarah's story shows us that no matter the struggles, no matter how broken we might feel at times, we have the power to change the course of our lives. Every hardship can be a stepping stone. Every failure can teach us something valuable, and every setback is simply an opportunity to grow. If there's one thing you take away from this, let it be this. You are not defined by your past. You are defined by the strength you show, the courage you embrace, and the decisions you make today. Sarah's journey is proof that we all have the power to transform our lives. We just need to keep pushing forward, keep believing in ourselves, and never stop fighting for what we deserve. Now, I want to leave you with a challenge. Take a moment to reflect on your own life. What's one thing you've been holding back on? What's one change you could make today to start building the future you want? Remember, you are the author of your own story, and the next chapter is entirely up to you. If Sarah's story inspired you, if it made you feel like you're not alone in your struggles, then join this community. Subscribe to the channel and be part of the journey. Let's continue to grow together. Let's keep sharing these stories of hope, strength, and second chances. Thank you for being here. And remember, your best days are ahead. Let's make them happen.